This show is part of OnePlace, a daily network of focused briefings across the stories people follow most.
Welcome to the Daily Roundup. I'm host Shees and I'm joined by host A. Today we are tracking significant political shifts, international naval standoffs, and a massive tech settlement affecting millions of iPhone users.
New polling shows voters blame Trump for rising gas prices.
Vivek Ramaswamy secures the Republican nomination for Ohio governor.
President Trump pauses the naval escort operation near Iran.
Ohio's gubernatorial race becomes a toss-up after the primary.
Pope Leo defends his peace mission against presidential criticism.
The FBI faces questions over AI-generated Beastie Boys clips.
Experts warn of all-out war in the Strait of Hormuz.
Apple agrees to pay millions over misleading AI claims.
Let's start with politics. A new NPR, PBS News, and Marist poll has just dropped some sobering news for the White House. With gas prices continuing to surge, more than 8 in 10 Americans report that the pain at the pump is putting a significant strain on their household budgets. Perhaps more importantly for the upcoming midterms, a strong majority of respondents are placing the blame squarely on President Trump. The data shows his approval rating has plummeted to just 37%, while 59% of the country disapproves of his performance. This marks the highest level of disapproval ever recorded for Trump in the Marist poll across both of his terms. Even more concerning for his campaign is that 51% of voters say they strongly disapprove, signaling a deep intensity of opposition that could be difficult to overcome.
The demographic breakdown of these numbers is even more revealing. Trump is seeing major declines with groups that were previously supportive, including voters in the South, rural residents, and white men and women without college degrees. Even white evangelical Christians, a core part of his base, are showing signs of sliding support. This shift has handed Democrats a distinct 10-point advantage on the generic congressional ballot test. Beyond just the numbers, there is a clear enthusiasm gap. Democrats currently hold the edge in motivation to vote, which is often the deciding factor in midterm years when turnout typically drops. Most Americans surveyed expressed that the economy simply isn't working for them, and the ongoing war in Iran, which is the primary driver of these high energy costs, is becoming increasingly unpopular across the political spectrum.
Moving to state news, Vivek Ramaswamy has officially won the Republican nomination for Ohio governor, marking a successful pivot from his national presidential ambitions back to his home state. The health technology entrepreneur defeated Casey Puch, a car designer and YouTuber, in a primary that saw Ramaswamy leverage his high national profile and a key endorsement from President Trump. Trump praised Ramaswamy on social media, calling him young, strong, and smart. This victory puts Ramaswamy on a direct path to potentially leading the Rust Belt state, following the term-limited Republican Mike DeWine. During his victory speech, Ramaswamy thanked voters for the momentum, but emphasized that the real destination is the general election in November. He has successfully cleared most of the Republican field by positioning himself as a staunch ally of the current administration and a vocal critic of pandemic-era policies.
Ramaswamy's rise in Ohio was bolstered by significant name recognition from his 2024 presidential run and his frequent media appearances. He even had the support of Vice President J.D. Vance, who traveled to Cincinnati to cast his ballot for the entrepreneur. Interestingly, even while competing in the Republican primary, Ramaswamy kept his focus on his Democratic opponent, Amy Acton. Acton is the former state health director who became a household name during the COVID-19 pandemic. Ramaswamy has used his platform to criticize her past public health guidance, while Acton has centered her campaign on making Ohio more affordable for working families. As the state has shifted further toward the Republican Party in recent years, Ramaswamy is benefiting from a reshuffled political landscape, though his brash style and rapid-fire delivery remain a polarizing force among the broader electorate.
Now to international waters. President Trump announced on Tuesday evening that the U.S. will pause its operation to guide stranded vessels through the Strait of Hormuz. This mission, known as Project Freedom, had only begun a few days prior, but is now being halted for what the president described as a short period of time. Trump claimed the decision was made by mutual agreement because great progress has been made toward a potential deal with Iran. He specifically noted that the request for the pause came from Pakistan, which has been acting as a key intermediary between Washington and Tehran. While the escort operation is on hold, the president clarified that the U.S. blockade of Iranian ports will remain firmly in place. This sudden shift in strategy has caught many by surprise, especially given the recent rhetoric from other top administration officials.
The announcement seems to undercut recent messaging from Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, who had both vowed that the operation would continue until freedom of navigation was fully restored. Iranian state media is already characterizing the pause as a victory, claiming that Trump retreated after failing to reopen the vital waterway. This development comes just as Rubio announced that the initial U.S.-Israeli offensive, Operation Epic Fury, had achieved its objectives. The administration is hoping that freezing Project Freedom will bring Iran back to the negotiating table. But the risks are high. If global shipping firms continue to face Iranian interference during this pause, it will be difficult for the White House to claim the mission was a success. For now, the global economy remains on edge as the flow of oil through the Gulf remains uncertain.
Back to Ohio's race. The general election matchup in Ohio is now set, and it looks like it will be far more competitive than many initially expected. While Ohio has trended red and hasn't elected a Democratic governor in 2 years, the Cook Political Report has already shifted the race from likely Republican to only leaning in Ramaswamy's favor. Amy Acton, the Democratic nominee, is focusing her campaign on the high cost of living, an issue that is clearly resonating with voters who are disgruntled with the current economic climate. She is advocating for child tax credits, lower prescription drug costs, and reduced utility bills. Acton's background as the former health director under a Republican governor gives her a unique profile, though she faces a massive uphill battle against Ramaswamy's vast personal wealth and his ability to raise enormous sums of campaign capital.
Ramaswamy's campaign has already begun leaning into the Dr. Lockdown nickname for Acton, criticizing her role in closing schools and businesses during the pandemic. Interestingly, outgoing Governor Mike DeWine has defended Acton's work, even though he has endorsed Ramaswamy. On the policy front, Ramaswamy has had to refine some of his more controversial proposals. He initially called for the total elimination of property taxes, but has since pivoted to promising the largest rollback of property taxes in the state's history. He has also raised eyebrows with suggestions about consolidating or even closing some of Ohio's public universities. As the race heats up, the contrast between Acton's focus on social safety nets and Ramaswamy's aggressive fiscal conservatism will be the central theme for Ohio voters. It is shaping up to be a high-stakes battle for the future of the state.
Next, the Vatican responds. Pope Leo has issued a direct response to recent attacks from President Trump, stating that his primary mission is to preach the gospel and advocate for peace. The tension escalated after Trump suggested in a radio interview that the Pope believed it was acceptable for Iran to possess nuclear weapons. The Vatican has clarified that the Pope has said no such thing, though he has been a vocal opponent of the U.S. and Israeli military actions against Iran. Pope Leo remarked that anyone is free to criticize him, but he hopes people will listen to the value of God's words regarding peace. This public disagreement comes at a sensitive time, as Secretary of State Marco Rubio is scheduled to visit the Vatican this week to discuss Middle Eastern affairs and bilateral relations with Italy.
Despite the sharp rhetoric from the president, the U.S. ambassador to the Holy See, Brian Birch, is downplaying the idea of a deep rift. He told reporters that nations often have disagreements and that the best way to resolve them is through authentic dialogue and fraternity. However, the friction isn't limited to the Vatican. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, once a close ally of Trump, has also criticized the war and defended the Pope's stance. Rubio has denied that his trip is specifically intended to smooth over these tensions, claiming the visit was planned well in advance. Still, the optics of the U.S. Secretary of State meeting with Vatican officials while the president accuses the Pope of endangering Catholics are undeniably complicated. The world will be watching to see if this diplomatic mission can bridge the growing divide.
Now, an FBI controversy. FBI Director Kash Patel is facing scrutiny over a promotional video that appears to use AI-generated clips nearly identical to the Beastie Boys' iconic Sabotage music video. The 2-minute video posted on X was intended to highlight the FBI's efforts to combat massive fraud. However, an analysis by NPR found at least 6 clips that were frame-by-frame recreations of the 1994 classic, directed by Spike Jonze. While the footage looks incredibly similar to the original, small details suggest AI involvement. For instance, in one shot of a car spinning out window grills, present in the original are missing in the FBI version. Another clip shows a character jumping between roofs where a telephone line appears to pass directly through the person's head, a common flaw in current AI video generation technology.
Independent experts who reviewed the footage agree that the use of AI is highly likely. Researchers from Bellingcat pointed out characteristic AI artifacts, such as distortions on the no-fraud license plate in the opening shot. So far, representatives for the Beastie Boys and Spike Jonze have not commented on the potential copyright infringement, and the FBI has not responded to requests for information regarding how the video was produced. The irony of using potentially deceptive AI technology in a video meant to showcase the fight against fraud has not been lost on critics. By Tuesday, the video had already garnered 500,000 views, sparking a wider conversation about the government's use of generative AI in official communications and the legal boundaries of recreating copyrighted artistic works for promotional purposes.
Shifting to regional analysis. The ceasefire in the Persian Gulf is now 4 weeks old, but experts warn it is showing its age and could collapse at any moment. The determination of both the U.S. and Iran to maintain maximum pressure on each other has put the regional stability in serious jeopardy. While a recent conference in Islamabad provided a brief window for diplomacy, the two sides came away empty-handed, unable to find common ground on their respective red lines. Analysts suggest that without significant concessions from either Washington or Tehran, the risk of a miscalculation leading to renewed hostilities is incredibly high. Control of the Strait of Hormuz has become the central issue, with Iran demonstrating that it can use the waterway as both an offensive weapon and a source of revenue, by threatening to charge shippers millions in tolls.
The economic consequences of this standoff are already being felt globally. The closure of the strait has led to shortages of oil, gas, and even helium for high-tech industries. Perhaps most critically, the disruption in the flow of feedstocks for fertilizer is threatening food security in vulnerable nations, risking widespread hunger far from the actual conflict zone. For the U.S., allowing Iran to treat the strait as home waters would be seen as a major strategic defeat, regardless of any tactical victories on the battlefield. President Trump's motives remain a subject of intense debate, as he balances the desire for a deal with the need to project strength. As the situation stands, the world is just one incident away from a slide back into all-out war, making this one of the most dangerous moments in recent history.
Finally, a tech settlement. Apple has agreed to pay $250 million to settle a class action lawsuit accusing the company of misleading customers about its artificial intelligence features. The lawsuit claimed that Apple's marketing for the iPhone 15 and 16 was deceptive, specifically regarding the capabilities of Apple Intelligence and an enhanced version of Siri. According to the settlement filed in California, eligible U.S. buyers could receive between $25 and $95 each. The plaintiffs argued that Apple promoted AI capabilities that did not exist at the time of purchase, and, in some cases, still do not exist. They alleged that Apple was essentially trying to play catch-up in the AI race against competitors like OpenAI and Anthropic by promising innovations that were not yet ready for the consumer market.
While Apple did not admit to any wrongdoing, a spokeswoman stated that the company chose to resolve the matter to stay focused on delivering innovative products. The lawsuit specifically highlighted that the iPhone 16 was delivered without the promised Apple Intelligence features, and that the transformed Siri personal assistant never materialized, as advertised. This legal challenge comes amid long-standing criticism of outgoing CEO Tim Cook regarding the pace of innovation at the company. For many users, the promise of a full-fledged personal AI assistant was a major selling point for the newest hardware. This settlement serves as a significant reminder of the legal risks tech giants face when marketing emerging technologies that are still in development. For now, millions of iPhone users can look forward to a small payout as the company moves past this dispute.
That's our look at the day's top stories. Thank you for joining us for this briefing. We'll be back tomorrow with more updates on the stories that matter most to you.